I can remember my very first day of practice. The breadth of problems that came in on that day, on my very first day of practice, were a woman with breast cancer who needed breast reconstruction, a man with a multiply recurrent sarcoma on his forehead, someone with a facial fracture, someone with a hand problem, and someone who wanted cosmetic surgery. And it was really the full spectrum of plastic surgery, and that's how my practice continued for a long time.
My first case in private practice was a face, eyes, and brow, which is, sort of a lot to be doing. And at the time we were doing these coronal brow lifts, which was a much bigger operation. And I think I saved the operative schedule that day from the hospital I work in, Manhattan Eye and Ear Hospital, which is now part of Northwell in New York. And I remember being really excited that I was the person in the room that was in charge. She was my patient. I wanted to make her happy. She had enough confidence in me. I was 31 years old. To pick me to have the privilege of doing her facelift.
A memorable moment, which I think was probably one of the first moments I was the lead surgeon on a case, was to do a latissimus flap, so taking tissue from the back and bringing it to the front to reconstruct a breast. And the surgeon kept coming in the OR just to check on me every so often. He was not even scrubbed in the case, and I remember I had this massive headache because I was so stressed out. He would just put AC/DC louder and louder and louder throughout the 4-hour case, and so I think to this day I cannot tolerate AC/DC.
I think every surgeon remembers their first incision, and I was a medical student at the time, I think a third year, and I was scrubbing in on a neurosurgery case, actually, to start with. I remember the attending surgeon pulling me aside and telling me, I know this is your first incision, but this is a 19-year-old woman. This incision, this scar is going to be with her for the rest of your life. And every time you make an incision, every time you're treating a patient, you have to think that it's going to have a lasting effect on this patient forever. And I try to remember that moment, just to make sure I don't lose how important every surgery is and how lasting an effect it can make.
One of my areas of expertise is body contouring after weight loss, and I distinctly remember the first time I met a patient that really prompted my interest in this area of expertise. So I was back in Rochester, New York as a resident, and I was seeing a consult in the emergency room, and this woman had this massive pannus that went down to her ankles with ulcers, and she couldn't get around. She just couldn't walk. She literally had to have this thing swung into the bed when she would transition from, standing to basically getting into bed. So we took her to the operating room. We hung the pannus from the ceiling with, hooks and chains, and took it off. And she recovered well and started walking. And she wrote me a really nice thank you letter. And I think that's when I really got turned on to that patient population and helping them.
You go through all this training, and then you really, the first time you do something by yourself, you realize like this person's life is in my hands. That's why I think it's incredibly humbling to be a surgeon.